Hey, what's going on? MJ Lennon here, and you are listening to episode numero dos, number two of the Fitness Business Life podcast, and you are very welcome back to the show. So, in this episode, I plan to talk a little bit about business, and I want to take you on a little journey through my own entrepreneurial career, and I want to share some of the more significant moments with you, some of the lessons that I took away from those significant moments, some of the mistakes that I made in those moments. And yeah, I guess I just wanted to share some of that journey with you, mostly because obviously I work with a lot of fitness entrepreneurs, and all of my businesses are incorporated within fitness in one way, shape, or form. And total transparency, one of the things that really gets me is when people attempt to coach other people on something that they haven't done before, is when they haven't walked the talk themselves. They've been a bystander, they've been on the sidelines, and they walk into an industry and they are trying to coach other people, and let's face it, you've got no credibility whatsoever if that's the case. So I want to take it right back to the start of my career within the fitness industry. And uh, you know I didn't know that I wanted to open a gym. I when I was in school, I kind of thought that I wanted to be a PE teacher. The only problem was that I wasn't very academic in school, and that's probably the understatement of the century. In fact, I was a complete reprobate at school, truth be told. I left school at the age of 15 because it just didn't light me up. Like, sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day was my worst nightmare. And especially for someone like me who's so active and kind of struggles to focus on one thing for an extremely long period of time. Yeah, it was just my worst nightmare, and at the time I didn't know how to manage my focus either, so it just didn't fit well for me. But without blaming without blaming society and school, at the end of the day it was my responsibility, and uh, I just didn't do good enough. But with that said, I knew that I wanted to be in fitness in some way, shape, or form. And I kind of had in my head that I could be a PE teacher, but I just didn't have the credentials. And so when I left school, I went to work for my father in his pub. And although it was a crash course in human nature, truly, and especially the nature of the pub that I worked in, like, it was in Belfast city centre, and yeah, it was, not only was it in Belfast city centre, it's the centre of the universe, because if you walk into that area within Belfast city centre on a Saturday night, you'll know what I'm talking about. It was a complete crash course in human nature, and so that meant that I learned quite a substantial amount, and especially I went into a leadership role very quickly. Like, by the time I was 17, 18, I was actually managing the bar, and I was trying to, which means that you're trying to manage people. And on top of that, extremely drunk and unforgiving people. And so figuring out that game taught me a lot about life. And I'm quite thankful for it, even though at the time the job, truth be told, was making me miserable. It wasn't financially rewarding. It was just, it wasn't a place that I wanted to spend the rest of my life in, even though it is my family heritage and it's the thing that I was supposed to do. I just knew that it wasn't for me. And so I stayed there for a few years because I was still trying to figure out life. And then as I got a little bit older, I was like, okay, maybe early 20s, I was getting more and more into fitness, and I then decided, okay, look, I know this is not what I want to do, but here's what I do want to do, which is something within this field. And so I started coaching people boxing sessions. So for anyone that doesn't know, I was an amateur boxer when I was 13 years of age, and I had my last fight when I was around about 24. And so my old amateur boxing coach, he allowed us to use the boxing gym a couple of nights a week. I think it was on like a Tuesday and Thursday night when there was none of the amateurs were in training. And I mean, it was great. Like the first sessions that I had put on, there was 20, 30 people showed up to them. And me and my business partner, PJ, well, we weren't really business partners at the time. We were kind of just winging it, truth be told. But because we had a quite a substantial network of people in the area that we grew up with, and I'm going to say that I also had credibility, not just me, but PJ as well. But I had credibility because people knew that I was an amateur boxer. And if I was going to do boxing classes, well, then they were like, well, he's the guy to do it. And so it took off quite rapidly. But I kind of had this gut feeling that I want to do something bigger than just host classes 2 nights a week in the boxing gym, albeit it worked well for a year, maybe a year and a bit. But then the owners of the boxing gym, they started to get a little bit restless with us because we were taking up a lot of space at that point in time, and our business was kind of encroaching on the the gym. And so I had to figure something out. I knew by that time that I had a taste for the industry and that I didn't want to go back. And so I pitched PJ on the idea of us opening our own facility, and this was maybe 12 years ago now. And so we looked for a location, and lo and behold, although I said I didn't want to go back, my father actually had like a small loft above his pub, and he said, "Look, why don't you just rent that off me for a couple of years to get yourself up and running?" Now, with that said, this was 3 floors up. The floor was reinforced by only two steel beams, and everything else was just wooden. And our clients would have to walk up through a public bar, up 3 flights of stairs, past a kitchen until they would get into the facility, which the facility was by no stretch of the imagination luxurious in any way. In fact, it was the complete opposite end of that scale. Like we had friends come in and build us like makeshift pull up bars and dips bars, and we kind of just figured it out. So I guess the biggest takeaway from that time was imperfect action beats inaction 10 times out of 10. Like nothing we were doing was perfect. Our customer service was horrendous. Our business was horrendous. We had no payment processor. We didn't have a limited company. We didn't have a sole trader. We didn't have any team. We didn't have any business operating systems. We had nothing. When I say we were winging it, I mean we were making shit up on the go, right? Now, with that said, because we were making shit up on the go, we were course correcting on the way, albeit we were course correcting over an extremely long period of time, but we were still making moves and we were still on the path that we needed to be on in order to get to where we are to today, which 12 years later, had we not taken those first steps into uncertainty, we would have never had the gym that we have today. We would have never had the academy, which helps, has qualified 800 or so personal trainers. We work with hundreds of people on the gym floor every year. I run a mastermind specifically for fitness entrepreneurs and coaches who want to grow and develop their business, which is now more members within that group than we've ever had. I also have now franchised our business model to 6 different locations, and we also run the ECA Summit, where we bring some of the biggest speakers from all over the world to Belfast to educate and entertain and also inspire our audience. So, with that said, it's been a long journey. It's been 14 years now. And again, I would have never had all of those opportunities had we not taken the first imperfect actions. So we stayed in that location for a couple of years. But basically, what happened was the council walked in one day and they said to us, "This is not fit for a gym, and you also haven't changed the use." And we tried to wing it once again and say that it was for private use only, but they knew. And so they said to us, "Look, you got to get planning permission, otherwise we're going to close this down." So basically, we had no idea what we were doing. We had to hire noise evaluation and traffic evaluations and so on and so forth. And it turned out within that time, I wasn't very confident that we were going to get the planning through. And so myself and PJ, we started making moves towards a newer, bigger facility within the same area that we were working in, so as not to disrupt the flow of our memberships or anything like that. And within that time, we had found a new location, and it just so happened that we did get planning permission for a small private studio above my father's pub. But with that said, we knew it was time to move on. We had been there for a couple of years. I think we had grown as far as we could do in the space that we were in, and something had to change. And so we found our second location, which was a stone throw away from the first. Uh, it was on the second floor of an old building in Belfast city centre. We signed the lease, which we didn't do much due diligence on either, which was a big lesson also. And so we took our operation around there and we stayed there for a couple of years. Now, because we were out of the, I want to say, safety net of our first location, because first location, the overheads were practically zero. So we were doing okay from a financial standpoint. Even though we were winging it, we had no business operating systems, we were still doing okay. But we moved to our second location and it became a bigger operation. And so we didn't know what we were doing, which was pretty obvious. And things really got on top. Like, we were there for a couple of years and it was like a shock to the system. Oh, this is how business is done, right? And like I say, we didn't develop ourselves within that time. So we were still operating on the basis that we were in our first facility, and we hadn't grown into the second facility. We were still doing all of the same things. We tried to hire a couple of team members. We tried to figure a few things out, but um, it was tough. Like, it was tough, and I want to say that the biggest lesson that I learned in our second location was that nothing drives learning like pain and necessity. Okay, we had to figure it out. And again, a lot of people say you have to have this big, powerful reason why you're doing business, and your values and vision drive every decision, which is another big lesson. But at the time, my main driver was I just didn't want to go back to working in a pub, and I just didn't want to live a mediocre life. Like, I was moving away from pain rather than towards pleasure. Like, that was the only plan I had, right? And I knew that fitness was the only thing that I enjoyed doing, and so I had no other choice. So, um, yeah, I mean, we started to figure things out. the good thing, I suppose, within that time frame, those first few years, is that myself and PJ, who's my business partner, we were very much in a stage of learning and not of earning. And so we invested pretty much every penny that we were making back into the business. Everything. Like, we left ourselves broke as a joke. We were like, everything just went back into our education at the time. No money whatsoever. Okay. So um I feel very fortunate that that's the moves that we were making, because we did pick up quite a lot of knowledge within the first 4 or 5 years that we were in business, because we were doing every course under the sun. And when so let me backtrack a little bit. We actually got evicted from our second location as well. Uh, the building itself was a part of it was a big scandal in Belfast city centre at the time, but obviously to do with politicians, and it went over my head at the time. I just knew that our landlord was involved in it, and he was a shrewd operator, and he had already plans to demolish the building that we were in, and that was the reason that he got us to sign only a 2 year lease, or at least a 2 year break, and it was so that he could get out of it, not us. Albeit he said to me, "Oh, this is for you." It actually wasn't. So we had spent all of this money into fitting out the second facility, and lo and behold, I was taking a session one night, and the letting agents walked in, handed me a letter. I opened up the letter. I was like, "What's going on here?" And I just seen eviction on the letter. And so anyway, all of this was playing out. It was national news, and our building was a part of it. There was quite a number of other buildings, and that was a heartbreaker, because, like I say, we did invest all of this money into the facility. We wanted to stay there for quite a number of years, at least to get ourselves established a little bit more. But um, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It was meant to be, because we knew that we had to pivot, because the opportunity came up. There was a facility which was, again, a stone's throw back towards the direction that we came from, which was across the road from my father's pub. And it was a facility that I had looked at for years, even before I was a trainer. I had said to one of my younger cousin, when we were actually working in the pub together, I said, I'm actually going to turn that into a gym someday. And so this opportunity came around to take over this location, which was dream location for me. And the only thing was, we knew that the financials were going to be way greater. The management of the facility was going to be way greater. Like, we knew we had to pivot big time in order to move this thing forward. And so whenever we looked at it, we were like, well, what are we really good at? And we were like, well, it's education. Why don't we educate other personal trainers? And I mean, I didn't know the process. I wasn't gonna just create some sort of system or some sort of certification out of the blue. We knew that we needed help in order to do this, and uh, this is where we got into our first business partnership outside of myself and PJ, and we took on a franchise. And it was also during this time where we were actually moving into our second facility. And so we took on this franchise, which was as well quite a hefty investment in terms of the financials. And there was also the fit out of the third facility, which was also quite a hefty investment in terms of the financials. So we had all of this stuff all at the one time. And over a 2 year period, we had to eat shit, right? And I don't say that lightly. Like, it was one of the roughest periods of my business career. And I think the biggest lesson that I took away from that was that the more pain you can take, the more progress you can make. A lot of the time, what happens in entrepreneurship is like, you can't fail if you don't quit. Most people pull the plug themselves. Most people get fed up and walk away rather than it being forced upon them, right? Which again, I get, and I'm like, I understand that. Like, no one understands that better than I do, because there's been so many tombstone days where I have thought, like, just what's the point, right? And everyone has those days, and if you tell me that you don't, I'm gonna suggest that you're telling a little white lie, because everyone has those days. And trust me, there were plenty in the lead up to our third location and when we first moved into our third location. So, um, with that said, we did start to see a little bit of progress, because we then started to, for years, let's say those first 5 or 6 years within the business, myself and PJ's focus was on developing our coaching skills and developing our knowledge in terms of, nutrition and fitness and movement and so on and so forth. But then we then started to look at some business development, which started to open up new doors, started to create, like, it started to make sense, right? Um, neurons that fire together, wire together. It was just new neurons created, and it came from outside eyes. Like the guys, Sean and Jay, shout out to them, who we first bought the franchise of. They had been in the game for much longer than what we had, and they had been investing in the business side of the game, and especially Sean, who had run quite a substantial business before he moved into fitness, and so he was well versed in that side of the game, and he shared a lot of the lessons in his own way, right? Uh, in those early days, and it opened my eyes. And so then what I done was I actually joined a mastermind of my own. So I started during this period of time. I started to travel to the US with my friend Dan McCaffrey, because we wanted to be ahead of the game. And for anyone who's in fitness, they'll know full well that in America, especially the west coast of America, they're probably at the forefront of fitness, education, customer service. Like, those guys just know how to do it. And so I started to travel to America 3 and 4 times a year to learn from people there. And what I was doing was actually bringing those skill sets back to Belfast, and we really then started to get a hold and get a foothold on what we were doing. The educational side of things, in terms of uh, creating great coaches, we had nailed down, but we didn't have the business side of things nailed down. And the more then I started to invest in that, the more skill sets we developed. And so the biggest lesson that I took from that period of time, and this was something that my mentor said to me, was you can't read the label from inside the bottle. Okay. So for years we had been chasing our tails, just doing what we thought was right. But sometimes your own intuition and your own instincts, they just don't serve you. And one of the most valuable things that you can do is invest in outside eyes, especially if you invest in outside eyes and the person has done what you want to do. They're not a bystander, that they haven't been on the sidelines. Like, the person has walked the talk before. Like, that's invaluable. Like, it's invaluable to know what you don't know. And so we started to really get a grasp on that from the business side of things. And I also started to, during that period of time, really look into my own personal development. And I started to break down some of the beliefs that I carried, some of the beliefs that I had around money, around the marketplace, around what is possible for me. Because, the vast majority of the time we inherit most of what we believe to be true about the world from our parents and from our family. And sometimes it's not the clearest view on the world. And so I started to really break down why I thought the world was the way it was in that period of time. And I got into this whole period of personal development, which was great. And one of the most standout lessons from that period of time was how you do anything is how you do everything. And I remember Bedros Koulian saying that at the Fitness Business Summit in San Diego, which I traveled to again with my friend Dan McCaffrey, and I was like, "Whoa, like what does that mean? Like that sounds, how you do anything is how you do everything." There's sounds like a lot of pressure, right? But what it made me realize was it's like everything doesn't of course have to be perfect, but your intent as a human being is what matters, so I might have given 110% to a certain task that I deemed to be a high value task, right? But then I might have looked at other areas of my life and not paid much attention to it and just thought, it is what it is. It doesn't require my input. And if you notice the intent there, it's like, you know, one of the things that I say to a lot of people now is when depending on how you operate on a micro level will also affect how you operate on a macro level. So for example, I always say to our students who come through ECA, listen, no matter what you're doing on the gym floor, you do it to the absolute best of your ability, right? So if you're brushing the floor, if you're hoovering the floor, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, not for the gym, but for yourself, right? And the reason why these things are so important, okay? So when you're doing these things, you do them to the best of your ability, no matter what it is, because what happens is whenever bigger opportunities do come around, you can't just flip a switch and say, oh, now I'm an operator. Now I'm the best in the business. It doesn't work like that, right? And so whenever I started to realize that, was when I started to really take hold of the bigger opportunities as well. And so how you do anything is how you do everything. And that sort of personal development period of my life, it was awesome. I had, so many awesome experiences, met so many awesome people. And by this stage, we had grown the gym and we had grown the academy. And I was like, okay, we were in it. We were in the game for, I want to say 5, 6, 7, maybe 7 or so years up until that point. Yeah, maybe 7 or 8. And okay, it had been, there's some people get into entrepreneurship and they're a millionaire by year 3 and 4. They're fast learners, but that is definitely not myself and not PJ. Our progress has been very steady over a very long period of time. And to be quite honest, like now reflecting on that, I enjoy it that way. Like, um, my disc profile is really high steadiness, and so I don't think I would like to have it any other way. Um, but anyway, one of my mentors then, a guy called Craig Ballantyne, who I was traveling to the US to see a few times a year. When I was talking to him about where we were in business up until that point, and I said, so where's the next level of growth coming from? Where's the next thing coming from? And he said to me, well, you need to, you've walked the talk up until now, right? So like I said at the very start of this episode, one of the things that drives me crazy is when someone doesn't have credibility and they start to try to coach other people when they haven't done the thing themselves. And that's so abundant in the world today. It's like, there's, I get like 50 DMs a day from some, 18, 19, 20 year old kids, because they are kids, um, offering me to grow my gym by 10K a month. And it's like, bro, how do you have a gym? Like, how many people have you added to that? Like, let me see you do the thing first, right? And I think that um, that that sort of attitude is very scarce today. It is like there's no point in beating around the bush. Like, so many people out there who want to be the expert in the field, but they haven't even been on the pitch. Right? They've been on the sidelines and they haven't done the thing first. Like, at least do the thing. But anyway, this was one of my sort of fears around the next step in the process, because my mentor had said to me, you need to start coaching other fitness professionals to do what it is that you've done. Right. And straight away, my defenses went up, and I was like, oh, I don't know, there's just so many. Like, that is a pretty crowded market. And again, this was quite a number of years ago. I was like, that's a pretty crowded market, and I don't know if I want to go down that route. And I don't know if it was a little bit of like, even at that stage, even if I had been in even because I've been in the industry for like 8 years or so up until that point, I was like, do am I in a position to be coaching other people? Because my business was far from perfect, even at that stage. Like, we still had quite a substantial number of things going on. And he said to me, which is one of the big takeaway lessons and profound moments that I can remember, was in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And he said to me, you are an expert at what you do. And by not sharing your expertise with the next generation of people and the people who need it most, you are doing them a disservice. He said, you have the solution to their pain and you are withholding that information. Right. And that kind of hit me because, like I say, I don't want to call it imposter syndrome because it's, like, just buzzwords, but I was kind of questioning, was I the guy to be doing this job? And once he said that to me, like, that flipped. I was like, I get it. Okay, well, let's do this. And evidence had shown, because there was people who were coming to me and asking for help, because obviously we coach these guys and they were coming through the academy, and then they were maybe leaving the academy, and they, maybe some of them were getting to where they wanted to be, some of them were stalling, some of them were dropping away altogether because they didn't know the next step. And so when I thought about it, I was like, can I get these people to where they want to be much faster than what they are doing that right now? I was like, yep. And so that started a new chapter. And again, there was synergy between all of those businesses, even up until that point, because we had the gym, which the academy um, fed into. And then when we added the coaching and consultancy business, which is now the ECA Mastermind, that also fed into the academy. So you can kind of see the path and the next step in the process. And so we started down that journey. And again, it took some personal development from myself in terms of how I wanted to do that. I joined other masterminds as well, because again, I didn't want to be the guy who just created this mastermind, having never actually been in one myself, which is again one of those things that it is unfortunately quite common. People do, because they think that it's easy money, and that's for all the wrong reasons, right? But anyway, that aside, I didn't want to be that guy, and so I continued to um, develop myself as a person, continue to learn in masterminds, and the business continued to grow, which was, I suppose, the next lesson, which was maintenance is a myth, right? There is no maintenance. You're either growing or you are dying. It's as simple as that. Because one of the things that I see a lot of people do in business is they make it to a certain point and they get comfortable at that point, and for whatever reason, maybe they're just fearful of taking the next step. Maybe they get to a certain stage and they think they can't learn anymore. They think they can't develop anymore. They can't make any more money, and so they might stall at a certain point, and maybe they're happy with that, which is fine. But for me, like, I am never happy being static, because the universe is ever expanding, and the way I see it is, if you're not growing and expanding with it, well, then you are dying. And so uh, we continue to grow the business, and so uh, one of the things that I realized at that point was we had gone through the first two phases in business. So the first phase, you've got scarcity, right? Which is in the startup phase. In phase two, you start to see a little bit of abundance, which is in the growth phase. And we had been through those. And so we were starting to get into the last phase in business, which is the scale phase. And that's where you start to think about the legacy of the business and giving back, right? So um, this has kind of been the point of focus for ECA over the last number of years, is what sort of our thought process has been, what sort of impact can we now make on the industry as a whole, and what sort of wider impact can that have? Because one of the, again, lesson here was, one of the things that my old mentor said to me was that you can't outgive the universe, right? And so I was like, okay, well, let me try, right? So I just started to think about giving back in terms of education, in terms of putting money in the pockets of the guys that were coming through the academy, in terms of helping them realize their dream of opening a gym and doing it faster and more efficient than what I had done it. And so the focus was to just give back. And like I say, my old mentor said to me, "You cannot outgive the universe," and um, I'm still trying to this day, and he is right about that. Like, no matter how much, uh, and I'm not, anyone that knows me will tell you I'm not a very spiritual kind of guy, but the more I think about giving back, the more opportunities that come straight back my way. And so the thought process, like I say, has been on um, uh, the legacy of the business and giving back to the industry that has been so kind to us over the last decade plus. And so we, like I say, moved into the scale phase of business, which meant we had a pretty big operation. By this stage, we had a team working together. So we had people in who were, managing the gym. We had people in who had now taken over the education in the academy, and we even had people in who were coaching on the mastermind and stuff for us. So we did have the business scaled at this point. Our facility, which took years, has now gotten to the point where um, you know, all of the fixtures and fittings are the way we want it. We've got all of the equipment in the facility that we want. We've got the service up to speed. Obviously there's always going to be improvements to be made, but we're happy with where it's at right now, right? And and like I say, I was on masterminds myself, and so uh, something came to light during a conversation that I was having on with a guy at one of my masterminds. He said, "Here, listen, that's a great business you've got going on there. Have you ever thought about franchising your business?" Now, initially, I had joined that particular mastermind because I wanted to start running events. But when he said this to me, I was like, interesting. Tell me a little bit more. Now, let me backtrack a little. This was just after lockdown, right? And I had gotten very restless because, bearing in mind, we had done the gym, We had done the academy, we had scaled those, and the the coaching business was now an add-on to that. And so at that time, I was extremely comfortable. Like there was a lot of opportunities coming my way. We could well have just coasted and sailed off into the sunset with that business, and that would have been fine, right? But COVID happened, and I got very restless over that period of time, and I had done a lot of soul searching, and I was asking myself, "Is this it?" Right? Because again, I actually didn't know if we were gonna stay open. Like we could well have been closed for the foreseeable. Like we there was just so uncertainty. We didn't know what was going on, but COVID happened anyway, and I I had joined this mastermind after COVID with the intent of running events, because I was like, well, if I want to reach a wider audience and if I want to impact more people, and if I can get, two, three, 400 people in a room at one time, um, that was a vision that I had, which again, I thought we had the capabilities at that stage to do, albeit we were not ready to do it. But that's a different story, because we done it anyway and we figured it out as we went along. So we made the decision then to start running events. And while I was at that mastermind to learn how to run events, a guy said to me, "You could franchise what you do." And he like he was a wealthy guy. He was financially free for the last 6 7 years, and so it would be crazy of me not to listen. And so he sat me down and he said, "Here's the exact steps that you need to take." And I did not need to be told twice. And so all at the one time, uh, while we were pretty cozy in business, I decided to rock the boat a little and add this franchise onto it, and also add this event onto it, which is going to be annual. And so that stretched us uh, uh, substantially as a team, because we're still quite a small team, and I like it that way. I'm sure we will continue to grow and add to the team as the years go on, but again, my high steadiness profile um, will take my time doing that. But because we were such a small team, we then had to apply our skill sets right across the board. And it's been an awesome journey over those last sort of couple of years. We've now gotten the franchise up to 6 locations. We've ran the ECA Summit twice, and both times they have been absolutely incredible experiences. And I am very fortunate now to this point. Um, I'm happy with what we've done up until now. If I think about all of the things that I have wanted to do in business, I'm very much in the trenches with all of them at this point in time. And so the big takeaway from this here is that your values and vision drive every decision. One of my values is education, especially fitness and business education. And so I wanted to share that value with thousands and thousands of people. And so, like I say, I'm in the trenches with that at this point in time. But I did have the vision of all of these things happen. And so your values and vision drive every decision. Finally, on this, I don't know where you're at in your own personal journey. Maybe you're just getting started out. Maybe you've been in the game for a couple of years, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Maybe I would imagine if you're listening to this podcast, you're looking for some sort of growth in your life. And what I would suggest is bite off more than you can chew, and chew furiously. You'll either adapt or you'll die. Either way, you're going to learn some amazing lessons from taking the next step. That I can assure you. I have not even though I said earlier, I had the vision for all of these things happening, I didn't have the plan down. I've had to course correct so many times on the journey. Um, it's been a roller coaster. Like, I couldn't tell you how we've gotten to this point, even though I tried to summarize it in this podcast. But it's been one hell of a journey, and all I can say to you is that no matter what path you're on, just take the first step. Take the first step. Bite off more than you can chew. You'll figure it out. My friend, so just this weekend past, we hosted the ECA Mastermind where there was a few dozen coaches there, and my friend Phil Brady, he shared the story of I think it's called the hermit crab. And what happens with the hermit crab is that it ditches its shell and goes and finds a bigger shell every time it goes through a growth spurt. And he said, "This is you in the thing that you're trying to do, right? So you live in a shell and you will outgrow it. And sometimes you just have to take the plunge and let it go and find a bigger shell. You will grow, you'll adapt, and you'll adapt or die. You'll move into it and you'll grow into that new thing. So yeah, my final big takeaway here is just bite off more than you can chew and chew furiously. I have been doing it for years, and the journey that it has taken me on has been absolutely incredible, and I would not change a thing because I learned so many lessons from that time. Even though I made so many mistakes which cost me so much money, I wouldn't take a single penny of it back because of the lessons that I learned. So hopefully that was valuable for you. And again, I'm so fortunate to be able to share that journey over the last 14 years plus with you. And if you did find value from it, and if you know someone who is in the trenches who needs to hear this episode, please share it with them. And thank you for listening. Take care. See you soon.